Hey, legends. Happy Thursday, 13th of November to everyone as we get deeply into the winter season here in the UK. How are we all doing? Please do let me know. Say a little hi in the chats if you're here and if you want to. And also, please do let me know if you're getting this loud and clear. Nice, clear visuals and nice, clear sound. So we'll just give everyone a few moments to get in, and we're going to run a little bit of a hybrid session today. We're going to focus, at least kind of half the session here. We really want to kind of look at the key focus topic today, which is staying in the game, managing burnout, staying consistent in trading. It's in fact, there was a new member in the chat today asking the very same question. All right, so we're going to deal with that, and on the way through, hopefully these points are going to resonate with everyone, or at least with some of you who may be going through issues at the moment or are seeing things that you can't quite get your head around. Maybe you are somebody that's in a little bit of a burnout state. I think that has been a very common feature for people. All right. Hey, crypto wealth builder, all good in Cancun, Mexico, the beautiful Caribbean Sea. Wonderful, my friend. I am a very, very keen scuba diver in my free time and underwater photographer. And you have just some of the most blessed waters around you there, as well as just some of the most amazing cultures. And don't even get me started on the food. I'm a massive foodie, and Mexican food, like proper Mexican food as well, just some of my absolute favorite. Shay, hello mate, always good to have you with us. Crypto wealth builder, yeah, hopefully, just trying to kind of cover really in my career, and as a team we get together and kind of say, okay, what were our big struggles, all at different kind of stages really. I suffered with burnout very early in my career. I suffered with burnout in my previous career, suffered with it as I was kind of making my way into this industry, and it's a constant it's a constant management tool. That's the thing that a lot of people don't realize about this, is that you don't just kind of go, brilliant, I've conquered burnout, and then you're good forever. Your situations change, your pressures change. So a little bit like trading, really. It's this ever-evolving game, if you like. And I agree with that. Mexican food is so addictive. Actually, I think last week when I flew back from Dubai, I got home and it was really early in the morning, but my body clock was all over the place. I sat there and I was starving hungry, right? And I looked in the fridge and I had some mincemeat and I had some some tortillas and some bits and pieces, and I was like, do you know what, screw it, I'm going to make myself some quesadillas, because they're so quick and easy to make, right? Like some chili, some jalapenos through it, some peppers, some onions, fry your mincemeat up with your spices and that, and then just slamming them between those and just grilling them off. Oh my god. But yeah, the management in that is a little bit like kind of managing ourselves, really, whether it be in life and trading and stuff. It's kind of allowing yourself those little moments, right? But just making sure that they're not too prominent, because otherwise, your health and your fitness fade, and then as does your sharpness. And in this game, retaining that sharpness is so very key. All right. So anyway, I think we've got a few people in with us now. So very warm welcome to everyone. Please don't hesitate to ask questions in the chat. Remember, these sessions really are about you guys. I just left the chart up from yesterday's session along with the plan that we outlined, because I did want to kind of bring into this, really does cross over with burnout, and certainly with consistency. Ultimately people look and they're like, really, the technicals are going to help us not burn out, are they? And yeah, massively so. Understanding your levels, areas you want to be active in the market, areas you don't want to be active in the market. I work with a lot of people, and as an intraday specialist, which is how I earn my money every day. I do swing trade, I position trade, I invest as well. But my main specialty by a long way is intraday trading. A lot of people see that and they're like, oh, that's really cool, because you just fly in, you fly out of the chart, a few trades here, a few trades there, bang, and you got the rest of the time to yourself. I assure you that's not how it works, unfortunately, because with any form of trading, you need to understand a really broad scope of what's going on, right? And again, this is something that plugs into that burnout factor, that there's so many things to do, so many things to cover. And what people ultimately do is they typically look for, these silver bullets, right? This magic answer to stuff, whether that be burnout, whether that be consistency, whether that be trade related, strategy, methodology, etc. So one of the first things, excuse me, that I wanted to cover on here, let's get ourselves a little note box out and just list a few of these points down, right? So if we're going to look at this, let's call it managing burnout and staying consistent. All right. So one of the key things here is to remove noise and anxiety, right? So how do we do that? Well, we do that by understanding our systems. We do that by understanding our market. And the reason I wanted to start with this one is because the crypto market is so broad, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that there's so many ways, there's so many tokens, right? There's so many things to be into. There's so many different opinions, right? Whether you're sitting on the DeFi side of things, whether you're somebody that really believes heavily in the tokenization, whether you're somebody that's very involved in blockchain, whether you're a Bitcoin maxi, whether you're somebody that thinks altcoins are going to change the world, or somebody that thinks that altcoins have no value at all. Like whether you're a speculator, right, that's just in this for the returns and you don't really care about the tickers. The difference is the very best people in all of those fields have a very deep understanding of who they are. All right. This kind of links back to the session that we covered yesterday as well, but there's some really, really key differences. So understanding yourself and your limitations, right? Now, limitations come in many forms, and people immediately see a term or a word like limitations and they think, well, that's, maybe that's kind of got some negative connotations to it. But actually, understanding yourself and your limitations is very, very empowering. For me, I've covered this story a few times, but for people that maybe aren't aware, I started my career as a swing trader. I was relatively successful at that. I worked for a fund over in Germany, then got more heavily into the crypto space and made a little bit of a name for myself, very, very small in a very large industry, and then was picked up, headhunted by TBN, given the opportunity to come here. And I've been here for 4 years. After 18 months, I was very, very, it was a great honor for me to be put in charge of the trading team here and to really help shape that moving forward. And again, really my success in that respect has just been to hire very, very good traders, which sounds easy, right? But actually, it's trying to make life easy for myself, surround yourself with the very best people. Within all of that, my career as a swing trader was very, very difficult for me because mentally I struggled badly. I struggled to sleep at night. I was really kind of all over the place. My routines were terrible. The stress just ultimately got the better of me. And I think I aged about 10 years in, 18 months. And the reason for that wasn't because I didn't have the technical understanding. It wasn't because I didn't have the conviction in the trades that I was putting in. It was to do with the time period that I was holding these trades over and seeing these, very volatile, ever-changing markets, change really at a whim. Some of the early bull runs were slightly different, okay, in crypto. But ultimately, any risk market, whether you're looking at the NASDAQ, cryptocurrency, etc., you're always going to be in a high volatility conditions. Obviously that varies. It's not always high volatility. That's not what I mean. But you have to expect volatility. And what I would be doing is I'd be checking the charts late at night, very, very early in the morning hours before I was due to get up. And it was just a real mess with it, right? Because I was trading funds money, trading, my own capital as well, advising members, clients, bits and pieces. And it was brutal. So, I was very, very fortunate. I learned, I was part of a couple of really amazing paid groups when I kind of came into the crypto space, because I really wanted to learn the dynamics of it from trading. In my early trading years, I worked under some very exceptional, Forex, stock and commodity traders, which is really where I learned my craft. But crypto was a really new animal. I was coming into a space with people typically younger than me. I'm not really, really old, but I didn't have a mobile phone until I was in my kind of mid-teens. They weren't really readily available. They grew up without smartphones, grew up without computers, especially laptops. That was all very new when I was in school. So I was probably part of that last generation that was really on that huge technological crossover. So coming into this space that was so tech laden, with people that had such a great understanding of the space, I wouldn't say it was intimidating. I say that I found it really, really interesting. But the problem was, spreading myself too thin, right? So the next time I'm just going to put on here is niche. All right. So niche just means that you really want to focus in on something that you can bring ultimate value to. So you want to look at your strengths, you want to look at your weaknesses, you want to understand what type of trader you are, what type of market participant. And within that, you really want to just hammer down and get really, really deep into that niche. And why is that important? Well, live ACA, hello and welcome. Excuse me. Well, the reason it's really important to understand your niche is if you look at any major discipline, career, sport, anything like that, for example, Tiger Woods wasn't trying to become the world's #1 golfer whilst also, trying to be amazing at tennis, etc. Right? Very broad example, I know, because there's other skills within inside the game of golf, right, that you have to master. But again, it's a little bit like trading, right? Now, the key is to stay within your sport. Now, if we break the sports, for example, into different categories, such as you've got investing, you've got fundamental analysis, you've got on-chain, you've got technicals, etc. And then within that, you've got different time frames, different approaches, the use of different indicators, different trading strategies, right? The key thing that kind of addresses all of these points, removes noise and anxiety, allows you to understand yourself, your limitations, and allows you to focus on your niche, is having that understanding. What do you do really well? Now, you might be sitting here right now having made really, really great decisions over this market so far. Let's just say this year. I know it's been a very turbulent bull market. But you also might be sitting here thinking, I did really well for periods and now ultimately I'm down, or maybe I just bombed through the whole thing, and really, really struggled. So what people will typically do is they will then, what's the right word? They will put all of those emotions into one basket and then just put this very broad label on it. I suck at trading, or I was terrible at this, or, I held when I should have sold, or blah, blah, blah. Actually, what you want to do is you want to look at what you did well and what you did poorly. What you did well, could ultimately have been really, really valuable for you to hold on to for the future and build out on. And what you did poorly is, it's your Achilles heel. It's what you need to fix. So to give you an example from my career, one thing I struggled with when I moved to intraday trading, and especially when I started teaching it at TBN, was, having a lot of members, on those shows, which I loved. So I built some wonderful relationships with members over the years. And still have most of those relationships now. And a lot of those people are still with us. Others have gone on, some are now professional traders. Others, continue to just trade on the side while they pursue other careers. But it was actually quite intimidating for me, really, because although I worked for a fund previously, and when you work for a fund, you have a risk manager, you have to, you can get called on the desk, meaning that basically if you're in a position, they think you're overexposed and they don't like the trade, they pull it on you. Seconds later, that trade might run and, run tens, hundreds of thousands, millions or whatever, right? And you're not part of that because somebody else made that decision for you. So there's always these different contributing factors that you have to plug in. But ultimately, a trading job is a relatively insular one because you're responsible for your actions. So that's another thing that people really need to do. In fact, we're going to add this on here as kind of almost like a side point, all right? But taking responsibility for your actions. There's a lot of blame flying around the game, and ultimately that's very, very toxic because you're not taking ownership of what you've done. And the problem for you there is that basically, you can bitch, you can moan, you can cry, you can call everything a scam, you can, punch walls and do the things. And I'm only saying for things I've done from experience, right, in the past. But it doesn't get you anywhere. Actually, what does get you somewhere is making sure you're just fastidiously journaling, keeping a marker of all of the things that you do in this market, because people will just step into this market, throw loads of money around, ultimately look at the end game, say, I didn't really make a lot of money, this is rubbish, I'm out. But there would have been some really, really good decisions you made there, and being able to decant where those good decisions came from, building out on those, is really, really, really key. So we want to understand the good decisions and the bad. Ultimately, we learn from both, right? And this kind of sits in here with understanding yourself and your limitations as well. But it's actually very difficult to step away and then, from a very kind of unbiased or neutral point of view, review what you've been doing. Okay, how successful that's been, what you really want to achieve. Maybe you feel like you should have achieved more, right? All of these things really, really do kind of have an effect on us mentally. And all of these factors, the reason they're on the board here is because if you do these things well, they can become very empowering and they can actually buy you a lot of time back. If you do them poorly or you don't take them seriously, they will ultimately erode your energy, your concentration, and will lead to burnout. So there's a couple of other things here, just kind of going back. I was very keen into sport when I was younger. I represented Great Britain at rugby. I was a very keen golfer. I played football to a relatively high level, but I wasn't ever particularly that good. I certainly wasn't threatening any kind of professional level leagues, right? But, I did martial arts, MMA, boxing, stuff like that, right? And it's always been a big part of my life. And within that, I've been very fortunate to work with some really good coaches. And, for example, one of my neighbors where I live now is an ex-Olympian himself, trains Olympians now, does physio and training for them. And I love having conversations with people like this about how they built their career, how they built their focus, because I think to work in any industry as an elite level operator, and I'm not branding myself that, but that's what your ultimate goal is, especially in an industry as difficult as trading. Trading, what you hear about, 96, 98% of traders fail, retail traders fail, etc., etc. What percentage do you hear about people that make it into elite level sport, right? Like incredibly small beyond that. So there is a great camaraderie and brotherhood between, and sisterhood, obviously, between people that achieve things at the highest level. And, there's a term, the 10,000 hour rule, that you can't really look towards mastery in any subject unless you're given 10,000 hours of well-considered practice, right? And this kind of comes back to another point that wants to come in here. And this is more of a question, right? How are you practicing? Yeah? The better word, training yourself, right? So what do I mean by this? Well, quite simply, what deliberate steps are you taking to make sure that you're a better trader or a better investor every day, right? Because the more often that you'll sit down, you'll look at charts all day, you'll kind of absolutely melt your mind. Most people are normally doing that with the stress and the energy commitment that comes to having a full-time job, a career. Maybe you've got ambitions within that career as well, but you just really love to trade, or maybe you're just in this to make some money. But there's no right and wrong answers in that respect, right? It's much more a case of, again, coming back to this point, you're understanding yourself and your limitations. And when we say limitations, we want to take something that's typically has negative connotations and we want to move that into a realm where we can make that positive. So, example again for me, what was an issue for me when I was intraday trading? Well, actually being in front of all those people, the members, bits and pieces, I started to realize that I was more concerned with being right than I was with being profitable in that environment. And it was very different to if I was trading, solo, trading with the team here at TBN. But as soon as that kind of public exposure came in, members, bits and pieces, I felt this strange urge whereby I just didn't want to be wrong on these trades. I kind of had this thing getting into my head where I'm just like, I don't want these people to think that they're not in a place where they're well taken care of, where they're in a place where they're around professional traders. Ultimately, we're judged by our results. And if people join live trading shows, it happened to me in my career where we've lost 2-3 trades in a row. People kind of come in, you get the comments, you get this like, okay, this is a joke, just some other crypto scammer or blah, blah, blah. It's fine. Look, things like that these days really do just roll off of me, right? But in the early days, those those digs used to hurt a little bit. And because of that, and because I never really addressed that, and I didn't want to address that, I didn't want to admit to myself that it was, those comments, it was the fact that it was making me feel, and in truth, it made me feel bad. It made me feel like, God, I'm getting called a fraud here when, if they've been on yesterday's show, we had some great trades and this, and I've got, this is the P&L, and look, you can see all the live trades. And for anybody that's maybe watching that's part of the Discord, or if you want to become part of the Discord, you can join for free at the moment. Then you can see this in the, we've got a little kind of internal group that we called Trade Club, right? You can see it there's a channel called TC Journal, which is under the Nest chat. It hasn't been active for a little while because what we were doing is daily live trading shows, and then those trading shows have been replaced by the recovery program at the moment. But within my channel, BC Richfield, if you go down a little bit further on the Discord menu, you can see the running results that we've got. I think we're over 150 R now in the year and a half that we've been doing it. But that figure could definitely be a lot higher, because there were times that, I was doing things that are really cardinal sins actually in trading, which is I'm not holding with conviction to target because I'm more worried about price coming back, and stopping me out. So I'll move my stop loss to entry, take a really kind of minimal partial out of the trade. And what quite often happens is price comes back to your entry position and then obviously rips from there, and you talk yourself out of taking some money. Now, I don't mind doing that sometimes, because with my system, there's different factors that are getting plugged in. If I don't see follow through, for example, if I don't see volume backing up the trade, or if I start to see momentum start to fail, which is a key part of how I trade, then I know that it makes sense to cover. But I wasn't doing that. I was doing that sometimes, but overall, actually what I was doing was just, I was just too scared, if you like, of taking those hits, because I just wanted everybody, to see that this is possible. You can come from nowhere. I used to run businesses. I started in the music industry when I left university. I didn't complete university. I just left. I bought a music studio. I toured for a long time. I built a production company there. I came out of that. I worked in London for a little bit. I ran one of the UK's largest scuba diving training companies, which was a family company. I started a public and school-facing procurement firm that came to, great status in London. And when I came out of that, I also built a digital marketing company. I did that from the age of 19 through to kind of my early 30s, before I was then decided that this passion that I had for trading, I wanted to make it a career. So, nothing in that background at all meant that I should have forged out a successful career in finance from that point, right? So I want everybody to really understand that, because some of the best traders I've ever met actually have no, financial education, stuff like that. So I really wanted people to see that, if I could achieve this, then I think anybody could. It's about hard work, it's about constructive practice, and I keep using that term, which is because if you want to have constructive practice, right, the whole point around that is that you're doing things that have structure, right? So I work with a lot of students. We have a lot of members that will come on and they'll be like, yeah, BC, should I have taken this trade here? What about this one here? What am I doing with this? And I'll say, okay, well, run me through the trade. What's the setup? What's the framing? Do you understand where price is going on the higher time frame? Are you using a daily? Where are you framing the trade? All you've sent me is like a 1 minute chart, and you kind of drawn a box on there and been like, I was kind of long here, but then this failed. And people will say things like, well, I kind of watched your last webinar and I think this is kind of how you do it. So I was trying to do this, or I think, people really are crazy in this industry in the way that they're willing to throw their capital at stuff before they necessarily fully understand it. And that's not a criticism. Ultimately, this is a gambler's industry, right? You've got to have that edge, that you've got to be willing to risk your capital. But believe me, if you can do it with structure, it will be that much better. What have we got here? Is that Guitar Tapping Pro? Brilliant. Just as about talking about my history in the music industry. I was a drummer, actually, so nothing as talented as a guitarist, I'm afraid. I'm 1% before I burned my funded account. I'm extremely sad. I have no words. I was in profits and didn't withdraw. Fast forward, I lost everything and I'm almost burnt out. This is a very, very common theme. But I tell you what I really like about the statement here, Guitar Tapping Pro, is the fact that you've really got a handle on what the issue is. I know it sounds really simple. You're 1% before your funded account burns out. You have no words. You're feeling the pressure. Well, look, first of all, you can get other funding accounts, right? If you go on things like Apex, if you go on to, we don't have any partnership with these people, by the way, but this is just, what I've done in the past and what I know my students have done. You go on to ones like Apex, they offer these insane discounts, right? If you find these traders, again, that I have no affiliation with, but there's this really good order flow trader who I like, what's his name? Rips, I think. There's like Carmen Rosato, people like that. They often have these links to Apex that give you like 80 or 90% off. Yeah. So you can get another funding account, but your most important challenge right now is kind of going back to a little bit of this list here. All right. So what was it that caused you to lose it, right? You've identified the fact that you didn't withdraw profits and you lost it as you were going through. That's a common theme for most people, for most traders. Not just that, but actually, greed, which is another really, really big factor. Like, I've worked with some immense traders over the years and could tell you some crazy stories as well that I can't really because I don't have their permission to do so. But I know people that have built, double figure millions positions over bull markets, especially, that have given it all back before the end of the bull market because they're so convinced and have stepped into such a god complex about how they're trading, how they've got this understanding of the market, how everything that would work, over leveraging these positions to try and make literally generational wealth and losing everything. I know a guy, for example, who built, I can't remember if it was 16 or 18 million, not the last bull run, the one before, and ended up 400 and something thousand in debt, which is mental when you think about it. And this wasn't some James Wynn type plum that's like, just basically doing all these things for clickbait and pretending he's not getting fees from these accounts that are paying him just as much as he's losing. These were really good professional traders with incredible systems, a really good understanding of the market, and they still managed to mentally fog themselves to a point that they gave all of those profits back. So what I would say is this: I would say that some of the best moments from some of the best people have come when they've, they feel like they've really taken their last swing in this. It's a cheesy statement from a Rocky film, right? But life isn't about how hard you hit; it's about how many hits you can take and keep getting up and keep moving forward, which is the really, really important thing. And the key thing for you, my friend, and for anyone that's in this situation, is now doing the painful task of going back through everything that you did. Again, saying this from my high tower, I know, but you really should be very accurately reviewing and journaling all those trades, because that journal and the review of that journal is what will really help you the most. If you haven't done that, spend some time now going back through what happened. Why did you take those trades? What were the factors that affected your worst trades? What factors were in place that affected your best trades? You might find something really, really silly that actually, 80% of your losing trades were taken between, say, 3 and 5 p.m. UTC. So you look at what you were trading, you were looking back, maybe you weren't making an allowance for key news releases that were coming into the market. Very simply, you can get yourself a free membership to something like Forex Factory or Baby Pips. Look at their economic calendar. If there's red folder news coming out that day that's going to affect the dollar and the US markets, then that's going to typically affect risk markets. And often people, really crypto focused, can lose sight of that kind of, the traditional market picture as well as the kind of macro environment, and really get in trouble. But saying that, we're in a very good macro environment for risk at the moment when you look at the S&P 500, when you look at the NASDAQ, for example. But that's not washing through into crypto. So understanding that is another key factor. Look, the other thing to say here is every day in this market that you're not losing money, you're probably ahead of most people. So going back to the session that we ran yesterday, which was looking at or maybe the day before, looking at over trading, and then yesterday when not to trade, right? And when you should be preserving capital. Again, all of these really unsexy topics, managing burnout, staying consistent, when not to trade, preserving capital, risk management, are all the things that people avoid, but ultimately are probably the most important things once you've really got a system nailed. Now, as members at the Birb Nest, which most of you will be here, and if you're not, again, it's free for the recovery period anyway, and you get complete access to this Discord. If it was me and what I did in the early days, I was very fortunate to have some wonderful people who allowed me access to their paid materials. And I also paid a lot of money for my education back in the day as well. But for some of these things, they would just open the Discord or they would do that. I would go in there and I would literally spend 5-6 hours a day going through all that material, ignoring anything that didn't relate to me or my trading systems, finding the traders that I really respected, really validating them, doing my due diligence and saying, right, I want to know everything about your system, everything about how you see the market. I would even, for example, watch all the webinars, knowing that I couldn't obviously record them, that I would lose them when I came to the end of my free trial. And I would just record little bits on my phone, these really key moments. And I would then decant that into a document. I had that document. I'd take screenshots of everything that I wanted to use. And look, I'm not suggesting you should go and do the same. I'm saying the opportunity is there for you to really, really learn about all of this stuff. Right, you've got access to all of this at the moment. If you're somebody that's struggling with a system, and that doesn't necessarily sound like you know, Guitar Tapping Pro, but maybe some other people in here are looking at it saying, you know what, I don't even really have a system. I just kind of been buying into the hype. It's really hurt me. I'd really love to understand that a little bit better. Well, in whatever time you've got left here, you have access to all the professional trading team courses. There's 4 or 5 on there that cover everything from fundamental analysis. One of the greatest traders that I've ever come across, a guy called Pedma7, who's an algorithmic and automated trader. He's got a course there on how to build these systems. I've got a course on there, hunting liquidity. Resume's got a course on there about volume, TPO, things like that, right? There's some really amazing courses on there. Just go and drop a thingy in the chat to someone. Just tag Nest Team or find any of the team that are available or active in the chat and just say, guys, look, I really want to get access to these courses. Can I have that, please? And look, if you just have to stay up late at night for a couple of nights in a row to really just run through them, take all those notes, it's great. But don't just go and watch all the courses. If you've got an idea of what type of trader you want to be, then find the one that speaks to you. No good watching a fundamental course necessarily if you really want to hone in on price action trading or volume. First of all, conquer your niche. Yeah, it gets back again to these points up here, removing noise and anxiety, understanding where you are. Right? Staying in that lane, building out your knowledge in that lane, and then saying, okay, you know what? I really understand the technicals. I really understand the system. I've got a strategy now that I can put in place. What else is really going to help me in this market? Then start looking at things like macroeconomics. Then start looking at things about, sector rotations. Look at things all loads of this stuff is available in the public domain, by the way, especially just with ChatGPT now. You can easily get a free account in there. Just ask yourself, what are the key factors, or what are the key drivers, narratives, or what are the key instruments that are affecting cryptocurrency at the moment? Why can't, and you'll get these opinions and it will draw them from across the web, and then you can bring them into your own wheelhouse and decide what you want to look at. For example, I'm somebody that uses the volatility index a lot, the VIX. For me, it's one of the most accurate kind of measures in terms of the pressure that comes onto not just cryptocurrency, of course. I trade the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, occasionally currencies as well, like I used to. But understanding that and understanding the risk narrative, then you can start to build that in. All of a sudden, what you've done is you've compartmentalized what you need to learn. And in doing so, you've stripped away the noise. So a good example of this, or certainly an example of this, comes from yesterday's show. All right. And I got a few messages about that. And if you're on the show at them, I really appreciate some of those messages. I know some of you were looking at very similar things. So ultimately, my plan is never for you guys to copy me. It's about, showing you what I do in terms of, hopefully there's certain parts that resonate with certain people. But the plan was really, really simple. As we came into the day here, again, this is with an intraday view on this. Yeah. This was the range I was really interested in. Okay. So we can see where it comes back from here. Now, this was the range that was set out on Monday. Monday's range for me is really, really important. So as we came into Tuesday here, it was really simple. I'm looking for these key areas, these consolidations that lead to these larger moves. I'm saying to myself, sellers control this area. Price came back down. We've not retested this. So now remember, you've got to be looking how many contracts were on offer there. People have stepped in. Probably still passive orders in here, limit orders, right, that are looking to get filled. Hey, Jojo, never late. Jojo always turns out exactly when she means to, which I believe I've stolen from Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, that statement. Then I'm looking at this area here and saying, okay, this is then controlling the move down. So as I step into my New York trading session here on Tuesday, I know very clearly where the liquidity is that I believe price is heading for. We've got this volume shelf down here, a consolidation at this level here that led to this large move higher. My thought process is that in this area here, if these buyers really want to defend this, then they're probably going to step back in, and we've probably still got some passive orders, some limit orders left here as well. So I'm happy to trade the breakdown of this. Remember, I would do this on a much lower time frame. Happy to trade the breakdown of this, the close below, which has now come back down. We validated this area here coming back down. Look how the bullish candles here are suppressing price. And then when we get this breakdown here, the retest, very, very simple trade down into here. Now, that might not have worked, but then I can reassess. Say I take the short here and that doesn't work. Okay, this is where things like anxiety start to creep in if you don't have a good understanding of it. So for me, the plans are really simple. If we start to show strength here and we get back above this, then I've got two choices. I can wait for this area to get pulled back into and see if those buyers have now taken control of this area, take short-term scalps up into this area, which is the key area the sellers control. But what I'd really be looking for here is for price to get back above this, right? First take out the point of control and then move up into this consolidation here that led to the market moving down. So I'm just trying to kind of trade within these spaces, really. Okay, so I always got a plan to trade both ways in the market. As an intraday trader, one of the challenges is kind of overlaying high time frame bias to then condense that in with the low time frame noise that you get. So when we did the show yesterday, I highlighted to people here, this was a key area I expected the sellers to control, but so was this. When we got this strong move up here in London, this pullback was for buying, right? So think of the reverse of what I just said. Or actually, no, it's the actual same as what I said here. If we got the move to the offside here and we got move up, price came back down into this area. You're then saying, look, sellers control this area. Price is now broken down. It's caught them offside. Price is moving up. This is their opportunity to mitigate. This is where I want to take. This is where I want to look to take some positions targeting higher. And, we overlay that same principle here because as price in London moved up into this, we violated this area, turning it from resistance to support. And then pullbacks here ultimately came from this inefficiency here to drive the market higher. Happy days. But when we came in, we were looking at this going through from midday, which is here, saying that as we get into the New York session, my plan is based on this area here. We either conquer this area, we get above it, we get, all of those sellers that were so prominent here are either now out, they've taken profit, or those orders have been removed. If not, and the market continues to be suppressed here, then the chances are we're moving lower. Now, the problem that I've got is this area has now become support, right? So just to give that a better visualization. So what I need to see now is price really kind of hold this. So as we get the equity market open, which is here, 1430, we then see price have this massive candle down below. So really, really simply, I'd put these on the chart previously, which was saying that these are the areas the bulls need to defend, and we need to see momentum off of these higher, which we never got. Momentum waned here, it's short retest, got back above this one. Look at the long upside wicks. You can literally see as buyers started to lose control of this area, right? And we can see here on the CVD, cumulative volume ripping up, higher, flat through here, tells me that those buyers are being absorbed. So all of a sudden I'm saying, okay, well, I could take some early stage positions here, but it's pre-market, not really how I trade, but that would have worked out okay. But my confirmation came in two places, right? Confirmation came below this level here and then coming back up on the retest, right? And if we look at this, if we look at this here, I don't know why that's going on like that. Might need to refresh that on. Anyway, we basically have a volume range that's been made up of this area within here, all right? So as we look at this, actually, I think it's because it's got extensions on. Hang on. Let me just pop this in quickly. There we go. Right, as we were looking at this here, this is our volume range, We've had an aggressive breakdown from here, meaning that then as price looks to step back up into this area, we expect this to form resistance. We're outside of the value area low, the volume area low. So value area high, value area low. This is the overall volume area, and this is the point of control. We've now had a strong move below that. This, which was support, has now turned back to resistance. The sellers are taking control of this area again. So retests here are for selling, and if I'm wrong, we get back above here, then I'm saying, okay, well, we're now back in this consolidation. I'm looking for price to break out one way or another. Basically, price is either in two states. We're either in a state of consolidation, or balance, or we're in a state of expansion, out of balance. Typically, price moves from these consolidations to new areas, then forms an area of new balance, or fair value. If price then breaks out of that area and can't get back in, chances are it's going to move back to where the last prominent buyers were in this case, or, if you're looking at price going the other way, moving back up to where the sellers were in control of the market. So look, really strong move down. The origin of this move down, we can either look at the at the breaker of this area, or you can just take the consolidation as a whole, right? But as we look at this here, look what happened. Price got back up into here, fine. So it's now asking the question of, okay, within this range, is price looking to break down here or break out? We get the breakout, we get the consolidation, ultimately we then get the move higher. So just by understanding that, I'm removing so much anxiety. All right, when I step in, I'm taking a look, I've got a plan, I've got a process that I need to meet. And if I don't meet that criteria, I'm not taking that trade. Okay. So if this sounds like you and you're like, yeah, do you know what? Actually, I've got a system in place. I really do understand it. I know where I should be taking these trades from. Maybe it's because you're over trading. Maybe it's because, you're getting that FOMO. You're wanting to be involved in these moves. So, so much that it's leading you to these bad decisions. So if anybody wants to share in the chats what their real issue is at the moment, we can really dive in and take a little bit of a closer look at that. Because really, again, people will look at this box, and I can even just see the people clicking onto this webinar now and clicking off, going like, I'm just not interested in this. I just want to know what trading system you're using, what indicators I can use to be profitable, etc. There's loads. There's tons and tons of really profitable systems out there that you can use, you can trade. Something I recommend to any trader is to go and get a book called The Way of the Turtle. And it's basically 2 very famous major traders based in the States basically wrote this book. So one of them believed that successful traders were born, that it was a skill set you were born with. The other thought that was nonsense and said that you can develop any person from any background into a trader if you have the right core material, you expose them to the right systems and give them the right training. So they had a bet. And they recruited this group of people. They went to the market, found people from all different backgrounds, and then basically refined that down to a group. You had, everything from, teachers to scientists to statisticians to computer scientists to people from really obscure backgrounds, and then turned around to them, gave them the trading system that they'd used to make millions and millions in the market, and said, you only trade this system. These are the conditions. Every time you get these conditions on these instruments, you enter along. Anytime you get these conditions on this instrument, you take a short. And this is your risk management process. They gave people everything. Ultimately, the results swung wildly. The best turtle or the best participant made several million in profit. The worst lost hundreds of thousands. And you kind of look there and you go, well, hang on, they've all got the system. They all understand it. So what's the issue? Well, the issue is, the belief in the trade. The issue is the anxiety that you show the trade, maybe the lack of belief that you have in it. Funny enough, one of the people that did the best was somebody that came from a computer science background, not because that they had any advantage in terms of automation because they had to trade the system manually, but because they came from a world where they understood that things in that respect were quite black and white and they were used to executing in that fashion, where a lot of other people would take a more philosophical view and be like, well, I know I should enter this trade here, but, this is a counter dollar trade and I see the dollar index is really strong today. So actually, do you know what? I'm smarter than this system. I'm going to sit out. As they watch the trade rip for the highs, they then get into it too late, get taken out of the position, and what should have been a really nice win very quickly becomes a nasty loss. All right. And that's just the nature of the psychology in these markets. So to run through these points again, right? If you're somebody that's facing burnout at the moment, don't be afraid to step away from the markets. Last week, I had a whole week off. It was some very special people in my life, family and stuff. I had some special birthdays and some family commitments that I didn't want to miss. And I knew that I was, in the 4 years almost that I've been at TBN, I've never really taken much holiday in terms of that. I'm always kind of plugged into the markets. And yes, I was still keeping an eye on the market, my portfolios, bits and pieces like that, but several minutes a day. Yeah. And I needed that refresher. I needed to step away. I needed to kind of refresh my mind. I was feeling quite burnt out, and not because of bad things either. Actually, the trading team have been performing exceptionally well. We've been very, very profitable this year. Life is, overall in a good place. The market conditions aren't exactly what we want. Of course they're not, but we can still remain profitable in these times. I'm in an industry doing a job that I love. I live in an area that I love, although I haven't really got many positive things to say about the UK anymore. I'm very fortunate to live in a very nice area. lovely neighbors, etc. So, you look at all of those kind of factors that are plugging themselves in, kind of saying, well, why were you burnt out then? Well, you can get burnt out doing things you love as well. That's the other problem. Staying up until midnight, 1 a.m. in the morning, on Discord and with the trading team and speaking to our teams that are based out in Canada, for example, and stuff, and around the world, looking at my results, reviewing stuff. And I still get that bug, that gets in my head. I'll see something new or I'll discover something new when I'm going through my results and think, God, I really want to try that. Like over a year ago now, I decided that I really needed to up my game in terms of volume spread analysis. So that's what I did. So I try and study at least 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, bring at least 10 hours of really, really high conviction, concentrated study to that. And it really, really helped with my results because, I was a profitable trader, but typically with price action systems, you're looking at areas, I'm mostly a mean reversion trader, meaning I'm more of a reversal trader than a continuation trader. And in that, you can get multiple runs on highs and lows and bits and pieces like that. If you look back on a chart like this, just for example, it's on a 15-minute, but as price comes up into this area, all right, you've identified this as a key area of rejection, right? The price comes up into this. You could have tried to short this once, twice, 3 times here, and your 4th attempt would have been the winner. How likely is it that after taking 3 losers in a row, which incidentally, I did that on a live show with members the other day, I was explaining to them about how treacherous this can be, and then basically just dived into this chart. And I was like, this is where I want to short it unless I get these conditions. 1 loss, 2 losses, 3 losses. People were like, really? I was like, yeah, because the 15-minute conditions are intact. We're not closing above this area. We are showing diminishing returns. We are showing weakness here. The CVD had started to show some divergences. And on the 4th one, we managed to get like an 8.4 hour trade or something out of it. So, okay, you've got to get rid of the 3 losses before. That's 3, say 3.5 hour by the time you've thrown your profit in. But you need to have that conviction in the market to do that. If I'd taken out the 4th trade, I would have stopped for the day because in terms of intraday, that's enough of a hit for me to take, and then I would reassess. But ultimately, bringing volume into this, understanding things like the CVD as well, for example, like seeing this here and seeing this come up, and then starting to see all of this buying volume, buying pressure coming into here. You then move that onto a lower time frame. You start to see those divergences that start to come in. So when the market's showing strength, but actually this here is showing weakness, for example. Yeah, like, just to show you one very quick example here. Yeah, we've got the CVD from this high to this high here showing a higher high, showing that there's buying strength. The volume is going into that. Ultimately on the chart, what do we see? We see the lower high showing that those buyers actually, the candle's printing what's really happening. This is showing you the volume that's coming in. So it's showing that this area here is being so heavily defended by the sellers. And then what I will do is I will use, volume, footprint, heat maps, bubble charts and stuff like that to identify when large buyers are coming into the market but not able to progress the market. Then as price breaks down, we then get this opportunity. So instead of 1, 2, 3 failed attempts and then hoping I've still got it in me to then short the 4th, for example, actually I wasn't actually actively short until here, but just showing this example here because this is a confirmation short. This would be a higher risk but higher reward short because it's happening from the point of origin. That really came helpful because before that, this completely agrees. Price is still moving higher and volume is still moving higher. So I could have then waited for this point to come in here and gone, okay, pre-market open, market's just pushed up a little bit, we're showing weakness, good area to short, right? So again, it does come back to that, understanding what your weaknesses are. All right, again, back to our little thing up here. Yeah, understanding yourself and your limitations. What did I understand about myself? Well, I understood that I needed to be better at that. And actually, I shouldn't really be, taking so many losses like that. There must be something I can do to refine that. I was finding really good areas and I'm in a very, very liquid market. So ultimately, I don't need to be giving those extra R back to the market if I'm not catching that first move. Removing noise and anxiety. This comes into things like social media as well. Most people will be following absolutely, everyone, and they'll look one day at this magic moving average indicator they think is going to change the world, or a volume indicator, or they see someone trading, bubble footprint charts, or they see this or that. The truth is there's going to be a specific style of trading that's going to really speak to you and something you're going to be very passionate about. And it's important to align with that, because that passion is going to be a really key driver in keeping you focused in these markets as well. Jojo, yeah, that's me. But because I have a week off, then I got sick. It wasn't fun, but still thrive. Yeah, I always get sick as well. I wasn't well on my week off either, Jojo. I think sometimes when you kind of, again, coming back to our burnout point here, you kind of, you're running so hot and you're basically running on momentum, and then you stop and the body just goes, a break, splat. And then you get it. But actually, it's still important. You need to get it out of your system, right? Your body needs to purge these things out. And then getting back to the list here. So that's understanding yourself, your limitations. Don't see limitations as a negative thing. Understand your weaknesses and make them your strengths. Yeah. Again, to go back to, any kind of example, if it's some kind of sport, we can use football as an example with you. Men's football, women's football, whatever it is. You could be an exceptionally technically gifted player that has no problem moving the ball. Maybe your kind of end product, maybe your crossing isn't particularly good, maybe you're not great from set pieces, maybe your penalties need work. So if you just go to training every day and work on carrying the ball and doing what you're really good at, it's great because you want to keep that polished. But if you're not putting work into the areas that you should do, you're not going to really develop into this major all-round player that you need to be. And that, when you're dealing at a very elite level, can be the difference between, signing that major contract from one of the better teams or not doing it from one of the worst. Applying this to trading is, if you're somebody that's, not particularly well, let's say, for example, you get a good read on the market and where you believe the market's going to react, but you keep missing your opportunities to get in and out of the market, then that's the point. Look at your entry mechanisms. Okay, are you doing something that you're just not getting these setups, or are you getting these setups and getting stopped out a lot? Do you need to look at where you're putting your stop loss? Maybe using something like ATR, or a different way would be, something you can investigate. When you understand and you pinpoint that area, a lot of these things kind of fix themselves, right? So you're removing noise and anxiety. You're like, do you know what? I really often identify the areas that price is going to move really well. But you know what it is? I'm not really getting into the trades that I want to. Then I'm chasing them in FOMO. Okay, so look at your entry mechanisms. Really study the data on where you would be taking these trades. Find 2, 3, 4 different types of entry mechanisms. Maybe you're looking for, lower time frame mini range breakouts. Maybe you're looking for liquidity sweeps and expansion. Maybe you're looking for candle formation patterns. Just look at those and say, well, which one really fits this the best? And what do I see as a really clear read? So when you remove that, you are understanding yourself better, right? And that understanding yourself removes anxiety, removes noise, and you're working on your limitations and you're turning them into strengths. You're also focusing on your niche. You're not trying to rip up the playbook and go, do you know what? I'm going to start trading moving averages now if I'm just a price action trader. No, you're focused on what speaks to you. You understand what's passionate, what your passion is, and what drives you. Build that out and let that be where your focus is. And you're also taking responsibility for your actions. That's such an important thing. We can all blame everyone in the world, but the truth is we're the one that hit that buy button. We're the one that hit the sell button. And in life, we're the ones that are ultimately responsible for actions. Yes, people can talk us into stuff. Yes, we can, do things that don't really work out. But ultimately, if we learn from our mistakes, I don't really consider them mistakes, especially the first time you make them. Think of them more as cost of admission or cost of education. Yeah, if you lost a lot of money in the markets now, you can do one or two things. You can either lay on the canvas and you can just take it and just go, this is all a scam, blah, blah, blah. I'm never doing this again. Or you can look back on that and go, do you know what? This is what I did really well and this is what I did badly. And if I just fix what I did badly, I can see that I can get positive results out of this. So I'm going to dust myself down. I'm going to reduce my position size. I'm going to master my craft first, and then I'm going to make money in the market. There's this whole thing in crypto that really drives me mad because everyone's so focused on the bull runs. And if we don't get an alt season, if you can't just get 1,000x coin, then no one's going to make any money. I can assure you there's a lot of people making a lot of money in these markets, in bull markets and bear markets. And you probably want to be one of those people. And if you are someone that's just happy to trade the bull markets, then you need to accept that. And you need to put a set of parameters in place that let you understand when those market conditions are prominent. Okay. And then if we look down here as well, understanding the good decisions and the bad decisions kind of ranks up with these as well. Yeah. In terms of understanding what you're doing poorly, understanding what you're doing well, continuing to practice what you do well so you stay sharp, but allocating more times to what you're doing poorly or what you can do to improve what you do within your niche. And then the last point here, how are you training yourself? Are you part of a community? Are you taking paid courses? Are you part of a paid Discord, for example, like we have, that give you the access to the courses? Are you somebody that's like, no, do you know what? I'm going to learn from the material that's in the public domain. Just do whatever's right for you, but just write down what you're looking to achieve. Otherwise, you will just end up flitting and focusing between all of these different things, and ultimately never really kind of managing to master what you want to master. And you need to realize you're up against some of the smartest and most well-resourced people and companies in the world in this game. So you need an edge. Yeah. Just trading price action isn't an edge. Understanding, supply and demand with price action starts to become an edge. Yeah. And then you can learn about things that kind of play into that. And then in terms of managing burnout, just don't forget as well that you need to stay balanced. You need a good diet. You need good rest, right? You need to step away from the charts. You need to, in this game, a lot of people say go and touch grass, but it's very, very true. You need to get yourself out in nature. Nature is one of the most important healing mechanisms that we have. And for people that spend so much of our time in an office behind a desk and stuff like that, we're very, very disconnected in nature. So almost all of my holidays are about, or any breaks that I take are about getting back to nature. I spend a lot of time with my dog, who's basically the light of my life. So she always reminds me, when I'm out walking along the beach with her in the morning before I start work and that, just seeing her run around, chase birds, and splash about in the ocean, and that it completely separates me from normally what my thought process is when I first wake up. When I first wake up, I try not to look at my phone straight away. I will look at my lock screen to see if there's any urgent messages for me. I'll then get up, make myself a cup of tea. Normally, if the weather's not too brutal here in London, stand out on the balcony, take that, come back in, get into my office, get myself set, understand what I need to do. Then I normally kind of watch how the London Open's playing out. Then I'll normally go for a walk with Yuki, who's my dog, and then we'll go out, 45 minutes, come back in, and then I'm set for the day. All right. That's such an important thing for me, is the routine. So remember, building good habits and good routines can be difficult, but they pay huge dividends. Building bad habits and bad routines is super easy and will ultimately really, really, really restrict you in your career, not just in trading, in life in general. And that's certainly what I've seen. So remember that burnout is about giving yourself mental space. It's about giving yourself physical space. If you're spending too much time behind the desk, make sure you're exercising. I fell out of it for a little while. I put on an incredible amount of weight. I'm always someone that's kept myself in good shape, but I like to be in really good shape, right? And I fell out of that, and I put on a lot of weight, and I was working 16 hours a day easily. Wasn't making time for that. All of these things started to just pollute my life. And I was like, just strip that away. Compartmentalize what you need to do. You can do endless things in a day. Make sure you're achieving the things you want to achieve, and that you're prioritizing the things that are going to affect you the most. For example, not fucking just scrolling through Twitter all day. It's so addictive, that thing. I still have to pull myself away from it, to the point I'm thinking about getting this phone, right? There's this somebody that I know and really respect in the trading industry put me on to somebody that's made this thing called the Minimal phone. And it's kind of like an old BlackBerry used to be. So it's got a QWERTY keyboard on it, and the screen is like a Kindle, where it's got that paper white screen. So you just avoid kind of watching all these videos, doing all these things. You can still access those apps and still do it, but it's a lot less likely you will, because recent studies, and this absolutely blew me away, studies I think that have taken place since the real inception of smartphones show that the average human will spend an average of 21 years of their life on their smartphone. Right. It's pretty scary when you think about all the things you could achieve in that time. You could go and walk Mount Kilimanjaro, you could climb Everest, right? You could basically travel around the world, you could sail around the world, you could definitely become a professional or very close to it in a lot of different industries and sports and stuff. So, that's another factor you want to build in. And also comparing yourselves to other people, which is basically what Twitter is a disaster. Lots of these people are lying, by the way. I've met people on my travels that posture as if they've got multiple Lambos, Ferraris and stuff like that. And I've been at dinners with them where they've been just beggingly looking around the room, hoping someone's going to pick up the tab. And I think that's interesting. But at the same time, be yourself, understand who you are, and just try not to add unnecessary stress to your lives, right? Life is short. You want to be able to enjoy yourself. Hopefully you're in this game because you're very passionate about it. And if you are, make sure that you're using that time constructively. And Jojo, went hiking, watching waterfalls in the week off. That was amazing. That is absolutely stunning. I love that. And I love doing that here as well. Like Scotland, Wales, stuff like that. And obviously getting further afield is an absolute dream. Yes, Jojo, using an old flip phone. Yeah, I'm thinking about just going back to keeping it really simple as well. Because I know it's a big distraction for me, work-wise, constantly messages pinging off, deal with this, deal with that, blah, blah, blah. You throw that in the mix when you have ADHD as well, and it's really disruptive because you're already struggling to concentrate on everything. So I basically have to create this very structured, almost like a paddock around myself that corrals me into the areas I need to be. But at least having that understanding is part of the battle, right? Anyway, just for everybody that attended this today, I just want to say a big thank you. We're at the end of the session now. Remember that you've got access to the Discord. You can ask as many questions as you would like. Please do make the most of that. Pop yourself into the Nest chat. Ask some questions. If you're somebody that doesn't really understand where you are in the markets right now or your systems, get yourself over to the trader channels on Discord, all right? You can drop down there. We've got our very own Crypto Birb, myself on there as well, Trading Tank, Resume, Just Pick, KZM, and Taha. And they're all exceptional traders who all make their living from trading, right? So you can learn a few things, but also what you can do is skim through those channels, see what really speaks to you, and think like, God, I love the way this person looks at the markets. I really understand that. I really relate to that. Then just really dive deep into that. You can ask some questions. Hit Kaz up, KZM, hit him up for his sources on how he does on-chain and fundamental analytics. Hit Trading Tank up, how he creates those amazing levels that just always seem to work. Hit on his great understanding of, mapping liquidity in key areas where buyers and sellers are in control of the market. Taha with his exceptional traditional market knowledge as well. Real dark horse Taha. Very, very, very good trader. Raz, he's on a short break at the moment. When he's back, asking him about volume, TPO, asking the Burbicator Pro, probably one of the most, if not the most successful crypto indicator ever made, which was made by him in the early stages of the Birb Nest. And for me, for anything that, if what I do resonates with you, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can tag any of us in the Nest chat. Remember, we are based all over the world, so different time zones, people get up at different points. Remember to get access to the WAP courses, right? Really dive into it. Look at all the calls, look at all the swing calls, look at all the scalps, look at the call statistics that you have actions to. You can access all of those calls before they were made. Why were they made? What were the market conditions? You can really learn from people and a team here that, in my opinion, is one of the very best and most consistent in the space. It's the absolute honor of my career to manage, these people. They've done such a good job and made my life, easy in a lot of respects, because they're very, very professional in what they do and they understand themselves very well. So on that note, if we can help in any way, please do reach out. You've got tons of amazing resources and people here that you can engage with. So make the most of your time here, and really do wish each and every one of you the very best of success with everything moving forward. And I hope this is just the beginning of our interactions together. And, whatever you go on to achieve in here, please do stay in touch and stay connected. All right, everyone. I'll see you all around the Discord. Have a fantastic day. And I look forward to seeing you around the Nest.